Good afternoon and welcome, everyone. I am so glad to be here together with you as we come as a campus community, albeit virtually, but it's better than nothing. So I want to thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us. I also want to thank those of you that were able to send in some advanced questions prior to this session. That was extremely helpful. Please rest assured that all of you will have an opportunity to be able to submit questions using the question and answer functionality on this call. And we will do our very best in the time that we have together to answer them as they come in. In a moment, I will be introducing our new president, Dr. Lori White. Some of them then after, so she will do some opening remarks for us, and then we'll move to some of the other panelists that we have on this call. Will share with you an overview of some of the work that they have been doing with many teams across campus, as well as planning for the fall term, as well as all of the tons of work that's being done to prepare for employees to phase back to work on campus and for students to return to campus, and to do our very best to mitigate the risk of this contagious virus. So again, we will provide you ample opportunity to ask questions during this session. So Angie Nally and Carol Smith have graciously said that they would ask the questions as you submit them via the chat. So once we open up the questions for all of you, then Angie and Carol will actually read them to the group. So now, without further delay, it is my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Lori White.
Thank you so much, Jana, and thanks to everybody who is joining our Zoom call for today. I hope one day to be more than just a picture in a square, and I long for the day where we have the opportunity to gather again as a community. In the interim, I really want to thank all of you for all the work that you have been doing to keep the fires burning here at DePauw, while also, I know, balancing many things at home. I know many of you have family members to also take care of, and none of this has been easy, I know, for any of us. I also want to thank the COVID-19 team for all of the work that they have been doing really since last spring to help us figure out how to manage our way through the spring, and then have been working all of this summer to help us think about what we're going to do this fall. I also want to thank our faculty, because we have asked you not only to change lots of things about how it is that you're going to deliver your courses in the spring as well as this fall. I also want to thank you for all of the dedication that you've had to professional development, and it was great to be able to talk with our students about all of the wonderful work that you have been doing to continue to enhance particularly our virtual learning. Want to also thank our admissions and enrollment team, our student academic.
I think you should go try to get him to lay down.
And everyone else who has been working so diligently this summer in preparation for the fall. So as Jana said, what we'd like to do is update you on our fall opening plans, particularly with respect to our students, talk to you a little bit about how we arrived at the decisions that we've arrived at. Want to give you a sense of the town halls that we've had with our students, and then answer a couple of questions. I do have a 4 o'clock meeting, and so I'm going to have to exit before the end of today's call, though I certainly am happy to respond to other questions that you might have of me directly. Please don't hesitate to shoot me an email if there is a question that doesn't get answered during the time that I am on the Zoom call. So as a cabinet, in collaboration with the COVID-19 group, we looked at a number of different scenarios for this fall. And we ultimately arrived at a decision where we wanted to think about ways in which we could bring some of our students back to campus, looking, of course, at the health and safety of our students, of our faculty and staff, and of the Greencastle community as our highest priority. And where we landed, particularly on the recommendation of the COVID-19 working group, was that in order to bring students back to campus in residence, we had to ensure that every student had a single room, and to also make sure that should we have an outbreak of COVID on our campus and or students who were exposed to the virus, that we also had enough spaces to allow students to be able to be isolate or quarantine. So that really meant that we only have about 50%, give or take, a couple on either side of that, of our housing capacity available for our students. And so then our next decision was, then how are we going to decide which students we would give the highest preference to inviting back to campus? And there's no easy answer to that question. However, we really focused on using a student success lens and thinking about, of all of our students, which of our students most needed to be on campus using a student success lens, which led us to prioritize students in this way. Our first and our second year students, our students for whom their home environment, however the student might describe that to us, is not conducive for them to be academically successful learning in a remote environment. Students who have already demonstrated that they've had some academic challenges here at DePauw, we thought needed to be a priority as well as our international students, our transfer students. And then we also wanted to make sure that we had some student leaders on campus. And so that category is broad, but you might imagine some of our students who are RAs, students who are peer tutors, students who have leadership roles in athletics and student government and other student organizations, because we certainly want to make sure that if the majority of our population are first and second year students, that there are good role models on our campus. And so we have submitted, or we have asked students to submit back to us a form identifying whether it is they are interested in living on campus next year. And let me also say seniors and juniors will also be considered. They, however, don't have the highest priority as the students that I just identified. But all of our students, every student will be able to let us know whether they have an interest in living on campus in residence. We also, for the first time, have relaxed our residency requirement. As you might imagine, we needed to do that because we can't house 100% of our students. So we will also allow students to be commuter students. And then there is the category, of course, for students who want to choose to learn 100% remotely. We are still trying to figure out what we exactly mean by a commuter student. Does that mean a student who has an apartment in Greencastle? Does that mean a student who is living at home? And what are our expectations for our commuter students in addition to the students that are in residence? And so our student academic life team and our COVID-19 team is working to define that category, but that is a new category for us. In addition, we wanted to make sure that students who chose to learn 100% remotely, or who are going to learn primarily remotely because they're not able to live on campus even though they desire to do so, would have the technology resources to enable their success. So we're giving every student who will be learning remotely a $500 technology grant, and that would also apply to a commuter student. So I should say really any student who's not going to be in residence. And then for our juniors and seniors, we also want to make sure that we support them, and we will continue to support them even though some of them will not be in residence. We're also going to allot them a $500 professional development grant, which those students could use toward any expenses that fall under that professional development category. So you might imagine a student could use that for application fees for medical school or graduate school, perhaps to offset an unpaid internship, perhaps to buy clothing to interview for a job, or they might might want to use it to conduct their research, whatever it is that falls for that student under professional development. We sent out communication, as you know, on Saturday. All of you were included in that. So all of the details that I just shared in summary are contained in that communication. We also have a very extensive FAQ. I think any question that you might have is probably somewhere in that FAQ, if you're willing to wrestle with that FAQ to find the answer. So I also want to give kudos to the communication folks for getting the information out on Saturday, as well as all the work that they've done on the town halls and making sure that we've got good answers to the FAQ. So a couple of things I want to say before we turn it over to the panelists. Some of the themes that have emerged from the town halls with students. Number one is students, of course, want to know why we made this particular decision, particularly because there are other universities, at least right now in the state of Indiana, that are fully opening. And what I have said to our community is each college president, first of all, there's no playbook for any of this. And each college president really has to make the decisions that she believes are best for her community. And we believe that the decision that we have made to depopulate our campus, understanding the risk of the virus to all of us is the best decision that we can make for DePauw. And we know that that's tough. If anything, it's reinforced the value of our residential experience at DePauw because all of our students want to come back to our university. So that says a lot about the educational, academic, and student life experience that we're providing to our students, but at almost 50% capacity, less capacity, we obviously can't house everyone. So understand that students are mad, frustrated, hurt, and angry, and those are emotions that we need to lean into. And so asking all of you to reach out to the students with whom you're close, provide the support that you can to them, and reinforce for them that we are still DePauw and we are still committed to providing them the best educational experience that we can this fall, even given the challenging circumstances. They want some guarantee that the remote experience, learning experience for them is going to be different than it was in the spring, acknowledging what we all know, that we had to rapidly move to a remote learning environment. And again, kudos to our faculty for the ability to do that so quickly. And Vice President Dave Burke was able to assure and reassure our students and their families of the commitment that our faculty have to ensuring that all of our courses will be of the DePauw quality that students and parents expect. They want to know what campus life will be like, particularly those who are going to be on our campus for the first time. They want to make sure that they'll still be able to engage in some level of activity, that they'll still be able to make friends, and that they will not be living in a police state. So even though that, of course, there are many different requirements that we will have of our students, I want to make sure that all of us understand that we have a set of values, we have a set of expectations for our student behavior, but this is not going to be a situation where we're all walking around trying to check off whether students are behaving or not. We have great students. We have wonderful student leaders. I know that they will hold themselves and each other accountable. You know, there's going to be some blips on the screen, but I think we have to go into this expecting that our students are going to live up to our expectations and our values. They want to know what it means to be a commuter student. As I said, you know, this is a new category for us, so this is something we're probably going to have to figure out as we go along, but, you know, we want to make it possible for commuter students to still be able to come to campus and to connect in socially responsible ways and socially distant ways with their friends outside, still engage with their coaches in training and leadership development activities. And so we will continue to refine what that is going to look like. And then, of course, the big question in the room is, are we going to reduce our tuition? And we have made the decision that we are not going to reduce our tuition. We are still delivering a DePauw education, albeit differently. And as one of my colleagues, who's also a president, says, when you go to a restaurant and you order dinner in or you take dinner out, the price is still the same whether you're dining in or whether you have takeout. So I wouldn't want to necessarily use that analogy, but I thought it was an interesting one to kind of simplify for folks who may wonder here why it is that we're not reducing our tuition. We are still delivering a high quality DePauw meal to our students in the form of our fantastic education. And so we're not planning to reduce our tuition. And folks have also asked why then we're not using our endowment to perhaps offset what might be a tuition reduction. And our endowment, as you all know, is our investment in the future of our university. And, you know, an average payout for an endowment should be about 5%. We are already, from an operational perspective, spending about a little over 6%. Banker Bob can give you the exact percentage. And we want to make sure that our endowment is here in perpetuity for the folks who follow us. And so certainly, you know, there are times when we have drawn from our endowment to support critical needs at the institution. And, you know, at some point in time, we may go back to that conversation. But right now, we are not planning to reduce our tuition. And I feel pretty strongly that we shouldn't, because we're still delivering a DePauw education to our students, again, albeit differently. So that leads to the next big question that I know you all have of me, are what are the budget implications for us, faculty and staff? And we don't know what they are yet. Because we don't know how many students are going to enroll this fall, and we don't know the costs of any COVID-related expenses. And I'm hoping, maybe I'm hoping against hope, that the feds will give us another surge of some additional funding to higher education. I've seen that in a couple of the bills. I don't know if it will make it for final signature, and I don't know how much the money will be. But certainly if that happens, that would offset some of our COVID-related expenses. So what I will say is, once we have some concrete information, we will engage the entire DePauw community and our board in what I like to refer to as maximizing our resources conversations, which is how can we best match our resources to the educational experience that we wish to deliver to our students. So know that we will be coming back to these conversations about the budget implications of this fall. We just don't know specifically what those are going to look like yet, and we won't know until we know how many students show up on our doorstep in a few weeks, either our remote doorstep or our physical doorstep, and we also won't know what all of the COVID-related expenses will be. And the last thing, and I forgot to mention this earlier on, is we will be requiring all of our students in residence and our commuter students to be COVID tested twice. And my colleagues who are on the COVID-19 task force can provide a few more details related to that. So I will stop there. I will stay on the call until 4 o'clock, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. White. Thank you very much. So I'd like just to take just a couple of minutes, if some of the panelists could give kind of a brief overview of some of the work that their team has been doing, that would be good for our campus community to know, that they may not be aware of. So Julia and Stevie, maybe I'll start with the two of you to maybe talk just briefly about some of the additional steps that we've taken to kind of mitigate some of the risks from a safety and wellness perspective, health and safety.
So I'll jump in and start, and I won't spend a whole lot of time on this, because I know we did a session a couple weeks ago for the campus community that did a high level of the task force and all the different areas that are on our task force. We have several staff. I think we have upwards of a dozen faculty and staff members who are participating in our core task force group and leading our pods. And even more faculty and staff members are involved in those subcommittees. So a lot of hands have gone into the work that has brought us to this point. So I'm just going to say a quick thank you to all of those people and not spend a whole lot of time. And I'll let Stevie say whatever she wants to say about risk mitigation, as I know she's doing what many of us are doing on a daily basis, and balancing working from home, and all of the people around us that are involved in that.
Leave it to the 3 dogs to want to start barking just as we get to that point. So I don't know who's outside, but I'm going to ignore them from now. So good afternoon, everybody. I think I I feel like we're all friends now. My name's Stevie Baker Watson. I will be so thrilled to see you in person. I will be so thrilled to see you in Tiger gear. And I will be so thrilled to see you on November 21st, celebrating an excellent fall semester on campus. We are getting into these final 4 or 5 weeks as we're getting ready to welcome students back to campus. So we are finalizing our plans for our testing, as Dr. White had alluded to, with students taking 2 tests within a 7-day period. Most of those tests will actually be sent home to students, and then they'll complete their second test when they're actually on campus. We're also looking at asymptomatic random testing to help us monitor the viral spread on our campus. And then we're also right now re-evaluating to make sure that we are where we need to be in terms of putting in place mitigation strategies. As Dr. White alluded to, a number of students have expressed to us they feel like campus is going to be very tight when they come back, and it's going to be that way the entire term. And realistically, when they come back to campus, it's going to be a little bit more narrow than what they've expected in the past, but we're doing that so we can establish a baseline on our campus for the viral risk. And we've got a number of factors that we'll be publishing shortly for folks to be able to follow along to know when we're going to be tightening things and when we'll be releasing things. What we do hope, though, is that a couple weeks into the term, we'll be able to loosen some of the restrictions on our campus. Because our students and our employees have been practicing good habits. And it wouldn't be a webinar if I didn't share the Tigers Take Care motto and the 4 W's of wearing the mask, washing your hands, watching your distance, and then wiping surfaces. Those are 4 things that will go a very long way as we mitigate the viral risk. So I'm going to pass it over back to Jana probably, and then she'll continue on introducing everybody else. But it's really great to see you all.
Thank you, Stevie. Thank you, Julia. So Warren, I'm going to punt this over to you. I know you and your team have been hard at work all summer and trying to prepare that campus for this moment. And I was very pleased whenever I arrived in my office that I had a big pail of disinfectant wipes and sanitizers. So thank you to you and your team. So maybe if you could provide just a brief update of some of the things that your team's doing to help.
Very good. Thank you, Jana. Welcome, everybody. I'll give a really high-level overview. If I don't cover something, maybe we can answer it in the Q&A later. But facilities has been definitely hard at work across the campus. We've been reviewing each of the playbooks the departments shared with us and created a list of the facility requests. So I know that Carol's team's working through the IT-related requests. Our house is working on those facility requests. There's about 500 items on that list at present. Really high level, there's a series of those requests associated with the hand sanitizer and the disinfecting wipes. And so we are distributing those across campus. So there's about 1,170 stations across campus that we're stocking. That's classrooms, that's your offices, public spaces, those kinds of environments, anywhere that we're going to have people basically in the kind of the public areas, if you will have some of those products. Another major component of the playbooks was some screening, some type of like a plexiglass type screen to help protect, provide a vertical but transparent barrier. So we're installing those throughout campus right now. We got about 80, some of those completed last week. We have another 50 that we're trying to get through this week. These are a little bit tougher installations this week, so a little smaller number, but we'll be ready for the August 10th staff faculty return, at least the first phase. We've been busy working on some of the furniture requests. So some of the furniture, we need to de-densify furniture in some cases. Maybe we need to relocate some pieces around. So that is also happening. We're supporting outdoor classrooms. So working on getting 6 tents on campus and the necessary components of infrastructure for that. I would tell you that we are working. I think we'll be in really good shape to meet the August 10th staff and faculty return for that phase 1. I would ask if you do need to come back to campus for something, not telling you to send your request to me for authorization. That's not what I'm asking. Just let me know if you've received authorization to return. That way we can make sure our teams we can space appropriately. Right now, we're pretty accustomed to being here almost by ourselves. So on August 10th, once we go back to a repopulated state, we're going to be ready for that. In between, if you don't mind, just let us know that you need to come. That way we can just be ready, and we're aware that you're coming. But we can answer questions in the Q&A, but I'll turn it back over, Jana.
Thank you, Warren, and thank you to your team again. So Dave, if you want to talk a little bit about kind of the fall planning and just very briefly, and so that we'll move into the kind of the Q&A session.
Absolutely. So the highlights of the fall planning from an academic side, we are currently in the process of revising the course schedule for our students. Based on the announcement Saturday, we're shifting many of our upper level courses to a remote offering so we can accommodate juniors and seniors. That process should be done by the end of the day tomorrow. Next week, from the 3rd to the 9th, upper class students will be able to adjust their course schedules so they get courses in the teaching modality that are most appropriate for where they hope to be located in the fall. And then the other thing that I'll just mention briefly is we have shifted the academic calendar. Classes now start on the 31st of August. There's no longer anything special about that first week of classes. To keep the community in a safer state, students will not travel for fall break. We won't have a fall break in terms of our academic calendar. We will continue classes for 12 weeks straight through the end of the day on Friday, November 20th, which is the Friday before Thanksgiving break. We'll take a 1-week break from the academic calendar for Thanksgiving. And then subsequent to that, there'll be 2 weeks of fully remote instruction and a week of exams, projects, papers, final assessments. So I keep that short intentionally so we save as much time as possible for the QA, but I'm happy to answer questions that come up as we move into that part of the program.
Thank you, Dave. And so that we make sure that we allow enough time for question and answers, I do want to acknowledge, Alan Hill, Amanda Kim, and Bob Leonard, whose teams are doing a great deal of work to try to support our students, look at our finance information and kind of help support all of the things that need to happen so that we are ready. We are ready for our students to return. So with that, I'm going to open it up. Yes, Bob?
Is it okay if I jump in before we go to Q&A? I just wanted to really express from the bottom of my heart appreciation for all that everybody is doing in these crazy times. It's just amazing to see, and DePaul is very fortunate to have you all as part of the team. And then I have a favor to ask. So Dr. White alluded to this, but it's probably going to be the middle of August before we begin to get a clearer picture of our fall enrollment under this newly announced plan. And our finance team, about that time, will begin working on new financial modeling to prepare for a board executive committee meeting in late August. And so given that tight timeline, I would ask a favor of all the departmental budget managers to do their very best to provide a quick turnaround on any requests you might receive, any assistance that our finance staff are looking for. I know they'll really appreciate that. So that was my little marketing moment. And again, thank you for all you do. Okay, thank you, Jen.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Bob. And Amanda and Alan, you'll have plenty of time to answer questions too. So I appreciate you being part of this panel. So Carol and Angie, so again, as a reminder to those of you that are on the call, please submit your questions to the Q&A and we will do our best to answer them. But in the meantime, we'll answer some of the questions that we received in advance. Angie, we can't hear you.
I have
And
one
she's having
question.
audio difficulties today. So the question that came in says, as of now, is there a threshold of cases, whether on campus, in the country, the state, or the nation, that we know of now that would indicate depopulating our campus again?
Julia, do you want to start and then I can fill in?
Sure. We are going to continue to monitor across the country, locally and statewide. Right now, we don't have a specific target number in terms of state or nation, county-wide, that would signal us depopulating. I know that for all of us, depopulating would be one of the worst case scenarios. And so what we want to be able to do, and I think this has put us in a good position by putting all students in single rooms and reducing the density of our campus, is to put us at the greatest likelihood of not having to depopulate. Now, with that being said, there still is the chance of that happening, or there may be other things that might happen throughout the semester. If we are seeing a lot of viral spread through campus, it may be that we would ask students to go completely remote for a period of time, and stay in their rooms and study from their rooms. But we are doing as much as we can to help avoid the depopulation of campus. Stevie has been working really closely with the Putnam County Health Department on our risk mitigation strategies. So I know she'll have a little bit more to add about that.
Yeah, I can bring some detail into that situation. It's really not a space where there is an absolute number that is going to trigger an automatic depopulation of campus. Although we do know some things in terms of if there's a certain number of cases that are unconnected, for instance, on campus, that would be something that we would want to discuss with Putnam County Health Department, because frankly, cases that we can connect to each other through contact tracing, it doesn't make us feel better, but it makes us understand how the virus is being transmitted on campus. So, for instance, if we might have one student in a dorm who tests positive and we go through the contact tracing process and we determine that they were exposed to somebody who had been positive themselves, that means something very different than someone who says, I have no idea how I contracted the virus in this space. We've had a number of discussions with the health department, and we've got about probably an 8 or 9 page document that we've worked on with them to come to an agreement about how we're going to work on campus should we have a cluster of cases or a couple of cases dribble in along the way. The other thing that both the health and safety pod and the education pod have been working on is providing information on indicators for campus. So that way you understand almost in a dashboard format what's happening on campus. And this is something that our critical incident management team will be reviewing on a regular basis throughout the term. So I have it here and I've scribbled on it, so I'm not going to put it up on the screen, but some of the things that we're looking at, for instance, is the time it takes us to get a symptomatic test back in terms of the number of hours. We're seeing reported in some ways that it could take up to 6 days to get responses. That's not great for us. The number of infections that are on campus, the number of isolation beds that we have available for our students, or the number of quarantine beds, and then the number of cases that come from our asymptomatic testing. So that will also be very good for you all as employees, but also for our students to understand that these would be the indicators of why we might tighten restrictions on campus or we might loosen them. And I'm gonna add on to this just a little bit because I'm looking at a question that we received via the Google Doc. So I think I answered the first part about how are we going to communicate collective campus health once campus starts. So that will be through this dashboard concept that we'll put on our coronavirus website. And then it says, how will employees be notified by the administration if there are positive COVID cases on campus? So when a positive case comes in and the university is notified of it, generally it's going to Dr. Harsha first, or it's probably going to go to HR. If it goes to HR, they're also going to route it to Dr. Harsha or a member of the DePauw Health Wellness Center staff. At that time, Dr. Harsha is going to conduct a small case interview with that individual to determine what their risk to campus is. So is this a person who has been working remotely and they haven't been on campus in months, or is this someone who is actively engaged on our campus? Once we determine that risk to campus, we really start two pathways. One is working specifically with the individual who is sick in terms of a case investigation, and that's something that Angie Nally would be leading out of the Human Resources Department. And essentially she'd be asking that individual questions about when they became sick or symptomatic, and then starting 2 days before that, who might you have been around in which you would have been around them closer than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. That's the definition for a close contact from the CDC. We then would begin contact tracing and notifying those individuals while maintaining the anonymity of the employee who would have tested positive. And then the other part of that discussion would be Julia and the CIMT group determining what type of communication needs to happen on campus. We're of the opinion we're not going to text message every time we have a positive case on our campus, but if there is a risk to campus, we want to let you know. And if you go to our coronavirus page right now, there's actually a link on the side. I believe it's community, I'll have to look at it, community something or other. In that space, you'll actually be able to see a single number of individuals who are connected with our population who have tested positive. And now I'll mute so somebody else can answer a question.
Thank you, Stevie. I think that this is probably still in your wheelhouse. So will faculty staff also be undergoing first week or random testing?
So when we started talking about testing for the students for random asymptomatic, we were really focusing on the fact that they had a congregate living environment, they had shared bathrooms, and they had shared dining facilities, which was very different than employees who were coming to our campus. It more closely resembled what your personal residence would be. So the recommendation from the health and safety group was to not do return to campus testing in that same kind of protocol. We are right now discussing whether or not there should be random asymptomatic testing of employees on our campus. And it's a complex conversation related to your own privacy and confidentiality, whether or not you consider it to be invasive, who do we test, who is in that pool. And so earlier this week, actually, a number of us initiated a conversation. I've been talking with our testing company, and I've also reached out to legal counsel for the university to get some guidance so I can bring that back to human resources for us then to work with 3 different employee groups on campus, our faculty, our staff advisory council, and then our administrative council. So we'll have more to share for folks probably in the next 7 to 10 days.
Thank you, Stevie. So Jana, this is a question for you. Given that we are holding at the 25% staffing model for the time being, is there a plan for staff and faculty whose home situations are not conducive to doing effective work for any reason?
Sure. So that really wouldn't be much different than the resources and support that's available to you now, even if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic and working primarily remotely. So I would encourage employees that maybe have situations at home or maybe even at work to either contact Bruce Birking or a member of Human Resources and to talk through that situation and see what kind of resources are available to you. And we will certainly work with you to see what reasonable measures we can put in place. But employees there's a lot of resources available to you externally as well as internally to be able to support you. Everyone's under a great deal of stress, and I recognize that everyone's family situation, personal situation is different. And so we want to be there for you to help. So please reach out, contact a member of Human Resources, and we do our best to try to provide you with those resources.
Great, thanks, Jana. Dave, this question is about the library. Could you remind us how the library will be functioning, and will all services such as checking out textbooks be available?
Great, I'd be happy to speak to that. So the first thing to know about the library is that Roy O. West Library, the physical space, will be closed for the fall term. And this is something that had been planned already because of the potential library renovation. The pre-work that was done on that building has impeded some of the exits. And there have been some other issues in that building over the summer that make it not advisable to open it. All library services will be available remotely. And that way we'll be able to serve both on-campus learners and remote learners, as well as, of course, faculty members. So with respect to books, books can be requested. They can be, if the person needing the book is on campus, the books can be brought to one of the other library locations for pickup. Components of books can be scanned. We've just become a member of a new, or will be next week, a member of a new consortium that will help us to deliver even more of our materials electronically as well. So short answer is Royal West will be physically closed. All library services will be available.
Great, thank you, Dave. Carol, I was hoping that maybe you could check the URL and see if we have any questions from either earlier submissions or since we've gone live at our meeting.
Sure. Let's see, there's a couple of questions here, a number of questions here, actually. The first one, a lot of news articles are talking about how work from home for this long will really change the way we look at our work days or our work week once we come back to the office, even in smaller groups or pods. With that in mind, what are the ways that HR sees our work or business operations changing with this new landscape we're living in? Jana, maybe you could respond to that.
Absolutely, I absolutely can. Hopefully it will. I think we've learned a lot of good lessons through all of this, some very hard lessons. But I think this moment in time has really kind of forced us to look at ways that we can be perhaps more efficient, some ways in which we could use our systems differently than we have before. So for example, I'm finding in HR, we have quite a few paper files. Are there ways, is that the right way to continue or not? So I think this has really given us an opportunity to look at how we do business and whether or not it's still, and I'm talking more from a staff lens, whether or not that those operations still kind of make sense and how we can streamline them. I also think that this provides us an opportunity to look at maybe workplace kind of flexibility, how we kind of balance home and life, and perhaps some of the ways in which our offices worked or required us to work. We may find that we can do things a little bit differently and still accomplish the key mission and the critical work that needs to be done, albeit just differently. So Dave, I don't know if you want to add to that from a faculty kind of lens or not.
Sure. I think what I would say from a faculty lens is that, as Jana said, we're seeing that it's possible to do some things differently than we've been able to do before. And I think candidly, in the course of the coming weeks and months, I need to have some discussions with faculty governance about when the pandemic is behind us or partly behind us and we return to work, which of the things we've discovered we can do differently are good practices to continue in certain circumstances, and which of the things are we going to have to let go of as we return to face-to-face instruction as much as we can. So obviously we're not going to want the pandemic to end and have a good number of classes offered remotely. That wouldn't be DePauw. But there may be some instances where we can do some things remotely, that would open up some new opportunities. And I see that as a shared discussion on the faculty side, at least, between academic affairs and faculty governance.
Perfect, I appreciate that. Here's another question from the web form that was submitted. It says, what are the ways that we can work together and collaborate with other areas of campus that will be hardest hit? I'm thinking specifically about what we can do in our individual offices to help best assist facilities management and their team, or what can we do to help student academic life as they welcome back students Those are areas that all hustle in the best possible ways. And I think all of us can work together to support them and others. I wonder, Alan, Julia, perhaps maybe you could start.
I would say Amanda too. Maybe Amanda, if you can speak to that as well from an international specific. So Alan.
Yeah, I would start just by saying, you know, the one fantastic thing about working at DePauw is we hire talented and fantastic people who, not just in their field of study or what their background is, but just bring so much talent and ability in so many different ways. And we do that already by, you know, helping each other. So it's not anything new, but I think this time really does call upon us to sort of what's our background, you know, what talents do we have that not only in your area, but, you know, I know, for example, Amanda and I were talking about, hey, how can we, you know, they got the pressure of a good number of international students coming. How can we work together to serve those students? And so it may call on some folks who really enjoy that opportunity to work with more international students and team up with Amanda and her team to make those things happen. You know, I think about Stevie and I talked about, you know, with fall sports no longer there, but our coaches are still connecting with their student athletes. There's no competition, but they still get to practice and things like that. So they're going to have high expectations of those students and making sure they're taking their classes, getting their questions answered, all of those types of things. So, you know, while this is a difficult time, it's great working at a place that, you know, you have folks who can step in and willing to step up and help across divisions, within divisions and things like that. So, you know, the reason when Dr. White mentioned, the last thing I'll say is when Dr. White mentioned that we're going to continue to charge the same cost to go here is because I feel confident and comfortable with that because we are going to deliver the support and services that we need to deliver to our students and our families, regardless if the students are on campus or off campus. We're shifting some things so that we have some folks focus on those students who are off campus so that they feel part of this community as well. So I think we're in a good spot there. Julia, did you want to add anything to that, or Amanda?
No, I think I would just reinforce what you said right there at the end is that we need to have a high focus on our students who are away from campus just as much as we do for our students who are on campus. Those students are more likely to feel disconnected from the university. And we want to ensure that they are staying connected. So we'll be working on maybe some strategic and robust plans for keeping in close contact with those students, whether they are new students or returning students, and maybe have already some pre-existing connections with staff or faculty, and that we can capitalize on those relationships that they have already formed and ensure that they are creating community amongst themselves as virtual learners.
Amanda, I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I think I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, because I know you and your team are working very hard as well. So thank you.
All right, well, those were great responses and a great question. And I also would second Alan's remarks about having great colleagues. So another colleague has asked this question, likely going to be Jana to answer. So with Indiana staying in stage 4.5 until August 27th, does that impact the employee phase return to work date of August 10th?
So good question. I would say it already has. I mean, you know, so the governor moved it from, you know, it was supposed to go to 5. If you recall, a few weeks ago, you know, we were going to move up that date. We were going to begin to phase back to campus really in 4 phases with 25% of staff coming back to campus to work, again, still with focus or remote work. And then 2 weeks later, an additional 25%. So we've adapted our plan based upon, you know, what the state of Indiana is doing, information that we're getting from Putnam County, CDC, et cetera. So Indiana's 4.5 plan, as you know, doesn't mean that nothing's open. There's a lot that's open. It's just that some things aren't open. So we believe on this committee that's been working that the approach from backing away, at least today, from a 4-phased kind of return to work approach that we just start on August the 10th and bring back up to an additional 25% of our employees per department. And that would not include those employees that are currently working on campus right now. So I believe from my perspective that we are in alignment and that we have made some adjustments based upon that.
Okay, great, Jana, thank you. This question is likely for Alan, maybe Julia. Our colleague would like to know if there will be any repercussions for students who do not follow the social distancing guidelines, for example, partying.
I'll take that one. You know, quite honestly, as we've had a lot of discussions for quite some time, that's what concerns most. As I've talked to the ACM colleges, GLCA colleges, the deans and vice presidents, that's where the conversation's been. Whoever you bring back to campus, how are you going to do that and make sure that you make sure that they're following the expectations of our policies. So one of the things that we have just from a textbook student handbook standpoint is that we'll expect all students and staff and faculty, but all students to follow the health requirements that are in play and policy that are in place, but also our code of conduct, your community standards, what we're expecting of them behavioral wise. And if it says there's no events larger than 10, then we expect them to do that. One of the things that we've done, we've been working for the last 3.5 months, twice a week with the Greek Community Board, for example, with the house corporations and the advisors. And they're in line with us with this, understanding that they could close down their house pretty quickly if they have students in it, regardless of what numbers they are, if they don't follow the regulations and things like that. So we're really going to emphasize more, as Dr. White indicated, we don't want a police state. We're going to emphasize more. We're going to work with individuals, not so much focus on the organizations in terms of holding them accountable. We really need it's a we moment for all of us. And so we're going to have those expectations with each student. The leaders that are going in, that's why we're bringing student leaders back in living units. We have RAs, we have mentors, we have those who are presidents of organizations. If you're going to lead, we want you to lead and handle those situations. And for the most egregious things, and we will have some people, there's no doubt about it, who will think they're going to come in and do anything they want to do. And then we will work with those students in a way that might allow them to go home and stay with their mom and dad again, or something like that if need be. So I feel confident that our students are going to live up to the expectation. If they don't, then we will make sure we handle them appropriately so that we can all stay safe and out of harm's way.
Thanks, Alan. The next question is likely for Jana and Dave. So the question is, are there resources available to faculty and staff to purchase technology, for instance, computers, cameras, software, et cetera, that would help them meet their remote learning needs?
Jana, I can start on that if you want. And so we did, as we transitioned to remote working last March, we took a number of steps to help both faculty and staff who needed to work from home and to help them make sure they had the resources to do that. So in some cases, we had technology at DePauw that we were able to allow people to borrow and take home with them. In other cases, especially where we needed to make a very quick pivot on the instructional side, without a lot of time, we were able to provide small amounts of funding for people to make purchases. We do still remain committed to making sure everybody has what they need to work from home, whether that's teaching or working with students or working to serve DePauw in other ways. And so what I'd say is if you have needs, you can start out by contacting your supervisor on the staff side, or academic affairs on the faculty side, and we'll figure out a way to try to meet those as best we can. That may not always mean funding for purchasing something, but we'll sort of talk through what may be possible. On the faculty side, for instructional needs, I know we've been putting some technology in classrooms or working toward that. For example, cameras in some classrooms where there are needs, And we certainly will help faculty have the equipment that they need to teach their classes one way or another. Jen, I don't know if you want to fill in there at all.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add from a staff side, so each supervisor, or if there are several supervisors that work in kind of for a larger department, have completed kind of a playbook, and in that playbook they have indicated whether or not there are any IS or facility needs. So you could certainly obviously check with your supervisor and then the implementation team and update your supervisor can update their playbook as well. And we'll take a look to see how feasible that is.
Perfect. Thanks for answering those questions. Here's a question from the web form, and I'm going to direct this maybe as a start for Dave and Ellen, but others as well probably have some great advice. The question is, what advice or guidance do we have to keep students engaged, possibly enrolled part-time or taking a leave of absence to ensure that they come back?
Carol, I suspect you're right that both Alan and I and many others can speak to that. Alan, would you like to start and I can fill in, or do you want me to start?
Go ahead, Dave.
So I would start with the word relationships. And I know a number of you, both in athletics, on the faculty, and I know across the university have already been trying to build on relationships that you've already have. So I would definitely encourage you to reach out to students that you already feel like you have a connection to, or if you're on the faculty side who are on your course rosters, or if you're on the staff side and you work with particular organizations, maybe members of those organizations. And I would be genuine with them. I would convey that, this is a tough time. We're not where any of us would like to be, but that you are enthusiastic about connecting with them through whatever modality is possible. If you're teaching a class, let them know some of the things you're excited about that class, and that you're going to be excited about it for both remote learners and on-campus learners. Let them know how you'll be available to them. Are you going to have Zoom office hours? Are you going to have in-person office hours? Tell them a little bit about what's going on. And continue to do that even for students who may take a leave of absence in the fall. I really like to encourage people to do that sooner rather than later, because our students are making decisions now about whether they're going to ask permission to be on campus, ask permission or indicate a preference for being on campus, indicate a preference for doing remote learning, or indicate a preference for taking a gap semester. And hearing from you and having a sense of what your classes or what DePaul will look like from your perspective for them in the fall may help them make well-informed choices, and may feel like in some ways parts of DePaul are not changing at all, and that's the relationship part. So please, if you're thinking that you may do that today or tomorrow, not in 2 or 3 weeks. Alan, what would you add to that?
The only thing I would add, I've long said to our student academic life team, is sometimes we can look through have a tendency of look through the lens of, everybody's situation is exactly the same, right? So let's just take those we have a number of students who've applied for leave of absence or a gap year thus far, and they're continuing to come in. And so instead of assuming that they've all did it for the same reason because of COVID, right? Instead of really understanding why they've done that, they've all said they want leave of absence so they can stay connected to us. So then we're going to identify who those students are, and we're going to assign staff members to follow up with each of those students to know what their situation is, and not just assume it's just like everybody else's situation. And so, Dr. White talked about with Joy and myself about how do we build so that family connection. So if we already, and Dave was involved in this, if we already have some mentor groups in place, they have a faculty member who's connected to that, especially in our first year class, but others, then how do we tie some staff members perhaps to those groups? You sort of have that core group of families that making sure no one falls through the crack. And that's not, again, those who are on campus, but those who are off campus. So I think we're going to be talking about how we build, Julia's putting something together, so how do we build those teams that we're all focused in that direction. So that's what I would add.
Amanda, is there anything you want to add to that, maybe particularly from the lens of international students or other groups that you work on with particularly?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I would agree with both you and Alan, all the things that you've said, but I would just add that for many of our both domestic students and international students, the experience of being away from campus in the last 6 months or so has been one that has been uneasy because has been quite different than what they had anticipated. And the number of uncertainties that have presented in their individual lives were unexpected. And so I think just like many of us individually are experiencing some uneasiness about what the future holds, how things will unfold for us, even as we learn about the different plans for our areas or for the institution. For some of our students, there are additional layers for our international students, additional layers having to do with our foreign relations, with the different conditions of medical and safety procedures or conditions that have been put into place that make it very difficult and tenuous for the students to figure out how they can choose best for them. And sometimes the answers aren't so clear. And so I know that in just talking with some of the students, the reach out via email or through phone, the communication, even if they don't respond, I know they've said, wow, that was really good for me to hear that somebody at DePauw has been thinking about me. And I feel just kind of a little bit lost and unsure about what to do or how I should choose. And so I think students really appreciate the reach out and the support, and that we know that this is hard for everybody, and that we also, not just the logistical pieces of getting the students here and signed up for everything, but that we see them and we feel the challenge of what the present circumstances present for them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm going to ask a question that's likely going to be Jana or I to answer, but the question says, can you remind employees what to do and who to contact if they are feeling ill? Me, okay. So
feel free to answer that. Yes, we know the answer to that, so thank you. You got it.
Okay. Well, first of all, if you don't feel well, we want you to stay home. So many people are still working remotely and will be working remotely in the weeks to come. But if you have work on campus and you do not feel well, you should stay home. And then the next thing you're going to do is just reach out to your supervisor to let them know, like you would any other time if you were going to have a sick day, just normal procedures. You do not have to tell them any medical information, just that you are not going to be coming to campus. And then the next step is to contact HR and specifically Bruce Berkey. Bruce would then talk with you and see what's going on. And, if you fell, sprained your ankle mowing the grass, that's okay. He'll, give you, your permission to return back to work. But if you have any potential symptoms of COVID-19, or you've been a close contact to someone who has tested positive or is presumptive positive, then he's going to refer you to the Wellness Center to one of our health managers. And the health manager is going to talk to you about medical advice. So that's not going to be Bruce, it's not going to be me, it's going to be someone who has that medical training. And then basically we will wait to get your return to work approval from the wellness manager, and then we'll communicate that back to your supervisor. So We want to keep privacy as an important priority. And we also want to make sure that we have the best people making the decisions about whether it's safe for you and the campus to return to work. So I hope that answers the question. All right, I'm going to ask another question. It's surprisingly about health, but this one is more for the Student Wellness Center. So our colleague says, are we able to increase our Wellness Center staff for students in order to provide enough support for mental health issues in particular?
Thank you for that, Angie. Well, Dr. Trevor Uhas, who's director of our counseling center, is both leading the student support pod and is an active member of the health and safety pod. So we have been talking from the beginning about how this time has made us really see our students are struggling with resiliency, are struggling with change in some space. And so he and his staff are actively working to engage with our students, both in one-on-one sessions and in group sessions. We are currently, I think, vacant a space right now in counseling services that we are continuing to search for. But Trevor would also, if he was here talking in my ear, would also want me to remind everyone who is on this call that not every time a student is reaching out and struggling, do they need to go to the counseling center for one-on-one mental health. Oftentimes what they need is someone who can listen, someone who can empathize with them, sympathize with them, and provide them warmth and guidance. So this is a space where everyone on this call, I know that we've talked about this as being this ultimate team to paw moment in every kind of way related to COVID, and everyone wear your mask and everyone wash your hands. But I would echo Dave's comment earlier about relationships and connection with our students. That's what they want to see from us. So once we have more information about the types of programming that Trevor and his staff will be able to offer to folks, we will make sure that that's actively communicated. But this is one of those spaces where it's a team to paw moment, and that we need to provide an opportunity for our students to come to us and allow us to listen before we simply pass them off to our mental health professionals on campus.
Angie, can I add to that? Because I talked to Travis yesterday, not Travis, but Trevor yesterday. Yeah, I'm getting them mixed up there. Sorry about that. And one of the things on the open position, he feels like he has some outstanding candidates to fill that position. So right in the middle of that process that's there. And the other thing that he's doing, as we think about those students who are off campus, he's in contact with a lot and following what the policies and regulations and rules are for other states, because right now they really can only give counseling, clinical advice for those who in Indiana. But he's investigating, are there other ways that they can make sure and serve our students in that capacity? So they're doing the research there. The staff are going to start coming in, part of that 25% that Jana was talking about. They're going to start phasing themselves in so they can be prepared. Not only, but it doesn't mean they can't, even if they can't do the clinical stuff, they said there are things they will be able to do to help our students with some group type sessions and other types of things that talk about wellness and that type of thing. And so I think they're trying to do their very best to be prepared.
Perfect, thanks for those. I'm looking, we've got the same question from a couple of different venues that I'm going to ask. And the question is what are the plans for hiring students and work study students for the fall?
Who on the panel wants to take that?
Julia, I think you have that, don't you?
Yes. And I'm sure that somebody listening, I bet Tosh is listening and has even far more information than I do because she's more on the ground and more connected to it. But many of you received a survey from her earlier this summer asking you to categorize your positions similar to how we had categorized the instructional mode for courses. So face-to-face, mixed, or remote. And so they are trying to establish a list of available student employment positions for students both on campus and students who will be returning remotely. I also know that they're waiting on some additional guidance from the federal work study program about how that needs to be carried out. So please look for information from Tosh soon. I know that they're waiting on some rubber stamp on some things before they roll out some additional communication about student employment. Please know that students are looking for employment. I'm getting very many questions through the COVID-19 account, wondering about positions they've held in the past, or needing to get work study, or perhaps they've been eligible but have not used their work study eligibility in the past. So reach out, just like we've talked about the relationships. If you have students that you've employed in the past, reach out to them if you were planning to return them to their positions this fall, and talk to them about whether or not they are going to be learning on campus or learning remotely. Ask them their interest and if they would be able to continue if you have a remote learner and you have the ability to hire a remote work study. We will have plenty of positions. I know Dave and his academic pod has been thinking about how can we continue with tutoring and student support on the academic side remotely. So yes, we will need, I'm sure you all need, student employees, and we will work to figure out how to slot students into those positions who are work study eligible.
Great, thank you. Shifting gears a little bit, here's another question from the web form that's been submitted. And maybe this is a Jana and Dave question, maybe to start, and others as well. Says, thanks so much for everything you're doing. I'm listening to this session and feeling very appreciative of all the work that you're doing. My question is not about me. As faculty member, I'm worried about staff being required to campus, even if they feel it's unsafe for them, especially if faculty and staff are not being tested. Can you provide any insight into the choices and flexibility staff have about the return? I understand the options that faculty have, and I appreciate that very much, but I'm less clear about how this will unfold for staff.
Thank you. So
Jana, it might help if I just provide some context about faculty, and that might help open a door for you. So, thanks for the question and for acknowledging that we're making flexibility available where we can. On the faculty side, it's definitely the case that not only can instruction be done remotely in some contexts, but we need for some instruction to be done remotely, because all along we've had a set of our student population who are going to be remote learners. And we now know that that set of students is going to be even greater. So, we need some instruction happening with in-person components, and we need some instruction happening with remote mechanisms. And that's one of the things that's allowed us to be as flexible, frankly, as we've been with faculty, although there have certainly been other factors as well. So I think Jana's better positioned to talk about staff.
Thank you, Dave, for that. So what a great question and an example of how, DePaul cares for one another. And so thank you for that question. So what would happen for staff is, we've impressed upon supervisors to try their very best to focus on remote work as much as they can. But to make sure, obviously, they're fair and equitable within their department. So maybe you have everybody in your department except for one person can work remotely except for that one person. And it's like, sorry about your luck, you're on campus. So we will encourage supervisors to work with that employee to see if they can work remotely, at least the majority of the time. If employees are concerned, certainly please ask them to reach out to human resources. We in turn may direct them to the medical pod. Sometimes it may just be additional information that they need. Maybe there's some adjustment, reasonable adjustment in their workplace that we can make easily. But we will do our very best to try to make, take reasonable measures to help everyone feel comfortable about coming on campus. And a lot of steps have been taken to date.
Perfect. Thanks for that. I have two more questions in the web form, and we'll see if we can get to both of those. The first one, maybe Jana, maybe Bob. The question is there any thought to giving extra vacation time since we haven't received much raises in the last few years, and now the retirement benefit has gone down? Extra time would help offset that.
Bob, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, we had a little conversation here looking at that question. I mean, I would remind us, first of all, that we have implemented summer Fridays, so we should take that into consideration as well. But I think it's a good recommendation. I think it's something that we can certainly take under advisement as we continue to look at what we're going to do compensation-wise. So I think it's a good recommendation, and we will definitely give that some consideration.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And I have one more question, and there may be others who come in the Q&A as well after this. But let me share this one. This is a real Team DePauw moment for our campus and community. While I support wearing masks, I know there is a lot of narrative around it that makes mask wearing a very politicized message or action. How would HR recommend we address those in our community who are not wearing masks? I'm not necessarily talking about accountability, but rather how can I be a good active bystander when I see things that do not meet our expectations? What recommendations do we have?
So I'll start this, and I'm confident that some of the other panelists may have additional questions. So just like with our students, our employees will be expected to wear masks. And again, we're all in this together. And so if you see a colleague or another individual that's not wearing a mask, again, this is kind of a learned behavior, right? And so, you know, for those of you that have gone to candid conversation sessions before, you want to handle that conversation with high care and in some directness and grace. And so I might, if it were me, begin that conversation with, hey, Alan, you know, Alan, I know you really care about this campus community and students and employees. You know, I notice you're not wearing a mask. And, you know, it's important. I want you to be healthy. I want me to be healthy as well. And again, coming from a care situation. If that situation still continues where that employee is not wearing a mask or abiding by the health and safety guidelines, then your next step is to talk to your supervisor. And if you're a supervisor, to maybe talk to the employee supervisor and to have a conversation. And again, to see why, I think you need to first seek to understand why. Why is an individual not doing what they know they're supposed to be doing? Then we can figure out, okay, how do we address it moving forward? Well, if anyone else wants to add to that.
I would say it was a great plug to say that there are going to be masks available for all of you.
I was just going to say.
I know. I have a package here. I'm going to open one up. Angie or Julia, do you want to tell people what it's going to be like or what they can look for?
Lauren's got one open. He can model for us. He's showing us on screen.
Oh, yeah.
So,
who is?
Lauren's got his.
Oh, okay.
Everyone will get 3 cloth. All students, all employees will get 3 cloth masks. Angie and the HR team will be distributing those for the next couple weeks through drive-through places. And I know she's going to be sending out some more information. And Dee Dee's modeling hers as well. And so we got some different colors there, different styles. And Angie, I know, is going to send out information more when she's got more of the details and logistics locked in. But there'll be several opportunities over the next several weeks where you can just drive up and someone will hand you a package of masks.
I think it's also important to note that for some individuals, especially from some of our students, we're hearing about how anxious they are because they haven't stepped outside very much, and they could select or opt to avoid situations where they were going to be around others for much of the time that they've been away. And as they return to campus, they'll really be looking to faculty and staff to be good role models and to really remind one another, right? Because it's something that we haven't had to think very much about. And so if you're not yet used to it, we really need each other to remind us about, you know, what we aren't doing to shape our expectations.
I might just jump in a little bit there from a classroom perspective too, because we've heard from some who have asked about how to handle masks in classrooms where they, of course, will be expected as well. So we do have a group looking at some sample syllabus language, just like we typically provide sample language about things like academic integrity and attendance policies. We will be working with a faculty group to make sure we get some sample syllabus language out to faculty. And then I do want to remind folks that there may be reasons why certain individuals, so Amanda spoke about some students who are anxious about wearing masks. There may also be people who have a specific reason why they can't wear a mask. For example, because of a health condition they have, or in a classroom environment because a student needs to read lips. So therefore they need someone else not to wear a mask, the instructor, so that they can read lips or to wear a clearer mask. Or there may be students who need to eat periodically during class because of issues with their metabolism. So we will be thinking not only about sort of in general, what are the expectations for wearing masks, but also what are some of these special situations that we need to all be sensitive to as well.
I just want to take a second to clarify. We will send out an email for all employees. Our current plan is that we'll set up an area by the Tiger at Blackstock Stadium with several hours available for employees to come and pick up a mask. So it will be contactless, and there'll be some information from the education pod included with the mask. So they will not be mailed. You will come and pick them up, and we'll have several opportunities as you're coming to campus for the first time. You can stop by and get your mask before you come to campus. And Stevie has just shared that we may have some homemade masks that some of our alums perhaps have made for us available in addition to the 3 cloth masks that DePaul is providing. You do not have to wear the DePaul mask. You can provide your own mask if you have one that you like, that you fits you well. That's totally fine as well. But we will provide you at least with the 3 cloth masks. But it looks like our time is just about over. So Jana, Dave, any panelists want to say some closing remarks?
There's one more question that just came in the chat that I'm guessing maybe either Alan's or Stevie, it looks like, would like to jump on.
Yeah, I'll take that one right now. So there is a small group of us that are meeting on Friday to work through the final logistics of what it's going to look like on move-in day. So to give you an idea, it's going to look different than what they've done before, and that they'll actually be driving into the Blackstock Stadium parking lot during a prescribed time in which they sign up for. There will be a group of staff members who will be doing symptom checks and temperature checks on everyone in the vehicle. And then if everyone passes, they'll be moving on to work with our housing and residence life staff in order to gain access to university housing, or moving over to their Greek chapter on that space. So we're going to be doing that over a 3-day period, probably from about 9 to 5-ish. I will say that when I went to my colleagues in athletics, they immediately stepped up. So I have 25 plus from there who are ready to help. But I don't turn anybody away. It's going to be like Monon Bell parking lot for 3 days. So at some point we'll send out some information to campus, but I do want to remind folks that if you do not feel compelled to help us, if you are not comfortable being in an environment where you are going to be outside, masked, and talking with other individuals. If you'd like a different role, like manning the phones that day or standing and directing traffic, we can do that for you. But please do what you're comfortable doing. But I know that there are a lot of students and families that are so excited about getting to campus. And so if we can translate the great work that Student Academic Life has done in all these years past about welcoming folks, like, let's bring that to them on that day too.
Thank you, Stevie. So in the interest of time, so I think we're right at the 5 o'clock hour. So on behalf of all of the panelists here, I want to thank each of you for the great work that you do day in and day out, and for DePaul. And again, this is the ultimate Team DePaul moment, and I am so glad to be a part of it. So go Tigers. Have a great day. Be safe.